Zara Preston's heels snapped the moment she stepped into the ballroom, sending her crashing into a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes. Glass shattered. Bubbles sprayed. And just like that, the entire wedding turned to stare. "Oh my God," she gasped, scrambling to stand, cheeks burning red. Still as graceful as ever, that voice, deep, familiar, unmistakable. Zara froze. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she slowly looked up. Standing above her, holding out a hand, was Finnley Rhodes, her first love, her first everything. He wasn't the lanky boy who used to sneak kisses behind the bleachers anymore. No, he was broader now, taller. His jaw was sharper, his eyes just as piercing. But there was something else too. Something polished and powerful in the way he stood, like he commanded rooms for a living. "Finnley," Zara breathed, barely above a whisper, his lips curved into a grin. "Hey Z." Her heart did a full somersault. No one called her that except him. Not since they were 17. She took his hand and he pulled her up effortlessly. She caught a whiff of his cologne, clean, expensive, intoxicating, and tried not to look like her knees were made of jelly. "You okay?" he asked, brushing a piece of glass from her dress. "Fine," she muttered, brushing her hair behind her ear. "Just humiliated in front of 200 people, but you know, great," he chuckled, and it hit her in the chest like a memory she didn't know she missed. "How are you even here?" she asked, blinking. "You weren't on the RSVP list." "I was a last-minute +1, he said. "The groom's cousin bailed. I ran into him last week in New York." "You live in New York?" she asked, surprised. "For a while now," he said simply. "You, still in Chicago?" She looked around awkwardly. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Yeah," he said. "It's been what? 8 years?" 10, she said softly. He nodded, his eyes scanning her face like he was trying to memorize her all over again. The wedding resumed its rhythm around them, but Zara barely noticed. The music, the chatter, the clinking of cutlery, it all faded. It was just him, her childhood love. Standing here, looking at her like no time had passed. "You look amazing, by the way," he said. She laughed nervously. "You're just saying that because I almost took out a waiter." "I'm saying that because it's true." She looked down at her pale blue cocktail dress, now speckled with champagne drops. "Well, thank you. You clean up pretty nice yourself." His dark navy suit fit him perfectly. His watch gleamed. His shoes probably cost more than her rent. "You want to get out of the champagne splash zone?" he asked, gesturing toward the terrace. Outside, the night was cooler. The garden lights twinkled across the lawn like stars. They leaned against the railing, the soft music from inside drifting through the air. "So," she said, trying to sound casual, "what do you do these days?" He hesitated for a second. "I'm in investments, startups, some tech acquisitions." "Oh," she nodded. "That sounds important," he chuckled. "It's busier than I expected, but I like it." "You always did like solving puzzles," she said. "Remember when we stayed up all night building that robot for the science fair?" He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that reached his eyes like he'd missed that memory too. "I remember," he said. "And I remember you programmed the whole thing because I was terrible at it. You were good at keeping me awake with midnight snacks. And you were good at stealing my hoodie every time it got cold." Zara laughed, her heart warming with every second. "Still mad about that?" Not even a little. There was a pause. A soft silence filled with 8 years of things unsaid. "Why didn't you ever reach out?" she asked suddenly. He looked away. "I wanted to, I did, but I thought you were better off without me." Zara blinked. "You broke up with me the night before I left for college." "I know," he said quietly. "And I've regretted it every day since." Her throat tightened. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected to feel this. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he added. "You had your future ahead of you. I didn't want to hold you back." "You never held me back," she said, her voice soft. "You were the best part of my life back then." He turned to look at her again, his eyes darker now. "You were mine too." Before she could say anything else, someone called her name from inside the ballroom. "I should go," she said, stepping back. Finnley nodded. "Yeah, of course." But as she walked away, she felt his gaze on her, and for the first time in years, her heart didn't feel so steady. Later that night, after the cake and dancing, Zara was slipping on her coat in the lobby when she saw him again. "I was hoping you hadn't left yet," he said. She turned, biting her lip. "I'm heading out." "Can I walk you to your car?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." They walked side by side through the quiet parking lot, their footsteps echoing on the pavement. "Zara," he said, stopping beside her car, "I don't want to wait another 8 years." She looked up at him, heart pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I still think about you. More than I should, and seeing you tonight, it's made me realize I'm not over you." Her breath caught. "I get that it's been a long time," he said. "And maybe you've moved on." "I haven't," she interrupted. He blinked. "I haven't moved on," she said, voice trembling. "Not really." He took a step closer. "Then let me take you to dinner, just one, no pressure, just us." She stared up at him, and for the first time in years she said yes to something she really wanted. "Yes," she whispered. Finnley smiled, and this time it wasn't just familiar, it felt like home. And as he opened her car door for her, Zara couldn't help but smile too. She had no idea he was a billionaire, and she definitely had no idea she was about to fall for him all over again. Zara had no idea what to wear to dinner with the man who used to make her heart race in high school and apparently still did. She stood in front of her closet, towel wrapped and dripping from the shower, staring at the rows of dresses like they held the answer to the universe. It wasn't a date, technically, but it wasn't not a date either. When she finally stepped into the restaurant, she second-guessed everything. It was the kind of place with velvet chairs, soft candlelight that flickered against crystal glassware, and a pianist playing something elegant and moody in the corner. Definitely not somewhere she would have picked, definitely not somewhere in her budget. "Zara," Finnley stood from the corner booth, already halfway toward her. "You look." He paused, eyes sweeping over her. She had chosen a simple black wrap dress and low heels, but from the look on his face you'd think she'd walked in wearing diamonds. "You look perfect," he said. She smiled, nerves fluttering in her stomach like moths. "Are you trying to impress me with this place?" she asked, sliding into the booth across from him. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "But mostly I just wanted to see you without 100 people around." The waiter appeared, seemingly summoned by magic, pouring water into crystal goblets and offering menus bound in dark leather. Zara opened hers and nearly choked on the prices. She blinked, flipping a page, then another. "Is this caviar on risotto?" she whispered. Finnley leaned in, voice low. "If you prefer burgers and fries, I know a food truck downtown that does truffle aioli." She laughed, grateful he wasn't pretending to be someone else. "I'll try not to make a scene this time." "No promises," he said, sipping his drink. Once they ordered, she folded her hands in her lap, unable to stop watching him. There was something different about the way he carried himself, not just confidence, poise. As if he'd spent the last decade in boardrooms instead of dive bars. "So," she said carefully, "investments and tech acquisitions," he nodded. "Started small. One startup led to another. I bought out a company 2 years ago that developed an algorithm for medical imaging." "That deal changed everything," her brow lifted. "Medical imaging, that's a long way from robotics projects in high school." "That was your field," he said. "I just got lucky backing the right people. I've got a decent eye for innovation. And I hate repeating the same day twice." She tilted her head. "So what are you now, a venture capitalist?" His eyes met hers. "Something like that." The waiter returned with their appetizers, some sort of smoked salmon tartare with edible flowers. Zara stared at it before gently nudging a forkful. "I've been to a lot of weddings," she said, "but I've never had one lead to a dinner like this." "Neither have I," he said. "I was supposed to leave town yesterday. I changed my flight." She looked up, startled. "Why?" He shrugged casually. "I wasn't ready to leave yet." The weight of that sentence settled between them. Zara broke the silence first. "You know, I always figured you'd end up on a motorcycle in the middle of nowhere, backpacking across South America or surfing in Bali." "I did all of that," he said. "Then I realized freedom's not about running away, it's about building something you actually want to stay for." She let that sink in, unsure how to reply. Your turn, he said. What have you been building? She hesitated. I work at a nonprofit, environmental restoration. It's not glamorous, but it's real. His expression changed, thoughtful, like he was genuinely impressed. That's incredible. I write grant proposals, mostly, she added. A lot of spreadsheets and deadlines, but I get to see how our work affects real communities. We restored a wetland outside Milwaukee last year, completely revived the ecosystem. You always cared about making things better, he said, even when we were kids. She looked down at her plate, a flush creeping up her neck. Sometimes I wonder if I should have gone for something more stable. My apartment's tiny, and I'm one coffee machine breakdown away from a meltdown. I'd rather hear about someone who wakes up passionate than someone who wakes up rich. She glanced up at him, surprised. You can say that now that you're both. His expression turned serious. I wasn't always. They didn't touch their entrees for a while. Later, after the plates were cleared and the wine poured again, the pianist shifted into something slow and haunting. A few couples stood to dance near the bar. Do you remember that night junior year? Zara asked. The spring formal when the power went out and they played music from someone's car. Finnley leaned back, smiling at the memory. You wore a silver headband with stars on it. I told you it made you look like a galaxy. She laughed softly. You kissed me in the dark. I've never forgotten it. Her breath caught. He stood, offering his hand. Dance with me. She hesitated only a second before placing her hand in his. Out on the small dance floor, he pulled her close, not too close, but enough to feel the warmth of him, the calm control in the way his hand settled at her waist. They moved slowly. The world around them blurred. I thought I'd forgotten how this felt, she whispered. You didn't, he said. Neither did I. The music faded. He didn't let go immediately. She stepped back, eyes locking with his. I should head home. I'll drive you. I took the train. I'll drive you anyway. Outside, the night had cooled. His car, a sleek black coupe, waited at the curb. She didn't ask what kind it was. She didn't need to. The inside smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't name. He drove in silence for a while, the city lights casting gold across his face. When he pulled up outside her building, she turned to him. Thank you, she said. For dinner, for everything, he shifted to face her. I don't want this to be the end of it. It doesn't have to be. He leaned closer, not touching, just there. Let me see you again, tomorrow. She hesitated, then nodded. Okay, he didn't kiss her, but he didn't need to. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she realized she was smiling. Not because of the restaurant or the dancing or the car, because she finally understood something. This wasn't the same boy she'd loved years ago, but the man he'd become. She was already falling again. Zara stood on the sidewalk outside the art gallery, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her coat as she checked the address again. The building in front of her was minimalist and tucked away between two boutiques in the West Loop. Nothing about it screamed high profile or exclusive, but the valet standing outside and the tiny gold crest above the door said otherwise. She stepped inside. White walls, glass panels, and soft, diffused lighting greeted her like a hush. A scattered crowd moved through the space, cocktails in hand, murmuring in front of contemporary sculptures and abstract canvases. Finnley spotted her before she saw him. He crossed the room effortlessly, dressed in a slate gray suit that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. You came, he said, his voice lower amidst the gallery hush. You invited me. Zara took a slow breath, her eyes flicking to the sculpture beside them. I thought you said this was a small event. It was supposed to be. He offered her a glass of wine from a passing tray. Then the artist's last piece sold for 7 figures, and suddenly everyone wanted to be here. She blinked. 7 figures for that? It's a statement on digital decay. Zara tilted her head. It looks like melted plastic. He leaned slightly closer. That's part of the point. She laughed under her breath and the tension between them softened. I didn't realize you were into art. I'm not really, he replied. I funded the startup that runs the platform sponsoring tonight, so they asked me to speak. I usually avoid these things, but I had a reason to stay in town. He didn't look at her when he said that, but his meaning settled into the air between them. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Watching him sip his drink, he lifted one shoulder. "Only slightly. There's a board member here who once tried to get me kicked off my own acquisition deal, and I'm sharing a stage with a woman who owns 3 private museums." Zara blinked. "That's a very specific kind of intimidation. She also once told a room full of donors I looked like a hedge fund intern." Zara grinned. "You kind of do," his brow lifted. "Thanks. Anytime." He took her hand then, gently, as if checking whether she'd let him. She didn't pull away. "I want to show you something," he said. They moved toward a quieter wing of the gallery, past a long corridor of black and white photographs. At the end was a single painting. Large, stark, a brushstorm of deep red cutting across a pale canvas like a wound. Zara stared at it for a moment. "It's violent. It's called separation," he said quietly. "The artist painted it after his wife left him. He sold everything to finish it." She looked up at him. "Why show me this?" "Because life's messy. And pain can leave something behind that's still worth looking at." Zara's throat tightened. "Is that how you see what happened with us?" "I see it as the only thing I've ever regretted not fighting for." Her breath caught. She'd come to this gallery expecting awkward conversation and overpriced art. Not this. A voice called Finnley's name from across the room. A man in a tailored tuxedo waved him over, gesturing toward the small stage being set up in the corner. "That's my cue," Finnley said. "Will you stay?" She nodded, and he squeezed her hand before letting go. Zara watched as he walked away, taking the stage with practiced ease. The room quieted. He spoke about innovation, about access to the arts, about the need for new voices in spaces long dominated by old money. But what struck her most wasn't the content, it was the way he delivered it. Calm, confident, magnetic. Like he knew exactly who he was and had stopped apologizing for it long ago. After the applause, guests drifted back toward the bar, and Zara found herself near a woman with a platinum blonde bob and an emerald pendant the size of a walnut. She gave Zara a once-over and smiled politely. "Are you with Finnley?" she asked, sipping something clear and expensive. Zara hesitated. "We're reconnecting." "Well," the woman said with a knowing smile, "he's one of the most eligible men in the city, impossible to pin down, but I suppose someone has to eventually." Zara offered a tight smile, unsure what to say to that. Finnley returned a moment later, his expression unreadable. "Everything okay?" she asked. He nodded. "Let's get out of here." They walked in silence, the cold air bracing after the gallery's warmth. He didn't speak until they reached the car. "I hate those events," he muttered. "Everyone pretending they care about the art when they're just there to be seen. Then why do it? Because sometimes being visible gets you access to the things that matter." She studied him. "Is that what I am? Something that matters?" He turned toward her, his eyes sharp in the darkness. "You're the only thing that ever has." She wasn't prepared for that, her voice was soft. "You left without saying goodbye, I know. You let me think I wasn't enough." "No," he said, stepping closer. "You were too much. You were everything. And I didn't think I deserved you." The wind tugged at her coat, but she didn't notice. "I'm not that girl anymore," she whispered. "I'm counting on it." His hand reached for hers, no hesitation this time, and when their fingers laced together, it felt like a promise. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you where I've been." Now, she hesitated. Then nodded. The car pulled away from the curb and the city blurred past the windows. They crossed the river, lights glinting off the water, and turned down a quiet street lined with wrought iron gates. At the end stood a building that looked less like a residence and more like something out of a magazine. Zara stepped out slowly. "This is your place?" she asked, stunned. "I moved in last year." The lobby alone had marble floors and a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. A private elevator took them up to the top floor, and when the doors opened, her breath caught floor-to-ceiling windows. A view of the skyline so clear it felt unreal. Everything inside gleamed glass, steel, soft light spilling across sleek furniture and polished wood. She turned to him. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want this to be about that. And what is it about, you? He said. It's always been you. The words hit something deep and unguarded inside her. She moved to the window, staring out at the glittering city. I don't know what this is yet, Finnley. I don't know if I can trust it. That's fair, he said behind her, but I'm not going anywhere this time. She turned slowly, and this time when he stepped forward and kissed her, she let him. Rain struck the rooftop like fingertips against glass as Zara stood by the wide window, watching the storm roll in. The sky was a bruised violet, flashes of lightning slicing the horizon in sharp streaks. She hadn't planned to stay the night, but when the storm hit and trains were canceled, Finnley hadn't hesitated to offer her the guest room. Now, wrapped in one of his robes that hung far too loose on her shoulders, she felt the strange comfort of being wrapped in something that smelled like him, like cedar wood and something faintly smoky. She could still hear the low hum of music playing from the kitchen jazz, muted and slow. She turned as the door opened quietly. I figured you might want something warm, Finnley said, crossing the room with 2 mugs in hand. Chamomile, it's the only tea I know how to make without burning something. She accepted the cup, fingers brushing his. You have chamomile? I've learned a few things in 10 years, he said as he sat beside her on the edge of the window seat. Including that sleep is impossible without it. She took a sip, then leaned her head against the glass, watching the rain blur the skyline. I still can't believe this is your life. It doesn't feel like mine sometimes, he admitted. Most days I wake up and wonder how that kid who used to fix up computers in garages ended up with a penthouse and an entire staff I didn't ask for. You have a staff, apparently. They keep showing up, she laughed into her tea. So what do you do when you're not buying companies or giving speeches at art galleries? Mostly, I try to keep it all from swallowing me, he glanced at her. I've built a lot. But none of it means much if I can't share it with someone who sees through the surface. Zara set her mug down. You think that's me? I know it is. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the streaks of water sliding down the window. I've dated since you, nothing serious. But tonight, standing in your world, I realized why nothing else ever lasted. I kept looking for someone who felt like you. He leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. And I kept trying to forget you. Until forgetting felt worse than the ache of missing you. The wind howled beyond the glass, but inside it was still, steady. Zara turned toward him. Why now? He didn't blink. Because for the first time I'm not afraid I'll lose myself by loving you, a beat passed. I'm not the same girl you kissed under the football bleachers, she whispered. I don't want her. His voice was low. I want the woman who stood in a gallery full of millionaires and didn't care about any of it, the one who builds things that grow. The one who makes me feel like I can finally stop running. Something inside her cracked open, and the warmth wasn't from the tea. I didn't come to that wedding expecting anything, she said, especially not you. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was on my way to a flight when I changed my mind at the last second. Why? Because I saw your name on the guest list. She stared at him. Your friend posted it online, he continued. I told myself I was just curious. But the second I saw you on those stairs, I knew I wasn't just passing through Chicago anymore. The rain softened, a hush settling over the city like an exhale. Zara stood, crossing to the bookshelves that lined one side of the room. They weren't filled with decor pieces or empty frames. They were packed with well-worn paperbacks, spines creased, corners folded. She ran her fingertips over the titles. You kept all these. I don't throw away things that matter. She turned back to him, eyes searching. What are you offering me, Finnley? No promises I can't keep. He rose, closing the distance between them. But I can offer you my time, my attention. My life if you want to be part of it. No secrets, no disappearing, just us. There was still fear in her. She could feel it, curled beneath her ribs like breath held too long. But there was something else, too. A certainty. Not in the future, but in the moment. I want to see where this goes, she said. I'm not asking for forever. But I'm also not walking away. He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. Then stay. She nodded. Weeks passed, not in a blur, but in something deeper, a rhythm. He flew her to a vineyard 2 hours away for a surprise dinner under lanterns. She invited him to her nonprofit's fundraiser, where he quietly matched every donation without putting his name on the board. They cooked breakfast in his kitchen, danced barefoot in her apartment, argued over books and laughed until the neighbors banged on the walls. One morning, Zara woke to sunlight spilling across Finnley's chest, her head resting there while his fingers idly traced the curve of her spine. "I bought a house," he said. She blinked awake. "What?" "Outside the city, with a garden, a real one." "Thought maybe you'd help me figure out what to plant." She lifted her head. "Are you asking me to move in?" "I'm asking you to make a home with me, however long it takes, however we build it." Her voice wavered. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." And when she said yes, it wasn't with fear. It was with the quiet, steady knowing that she hadn't fallen again, she'd risen, with the same man who had once kissed her with teenage hope and now kissed her with every intention of staying. They didn't need ceremonies to know what they were building. But months later, under a canopy of white blossoms in their garden, he surprised her with a ring tucked inside a hollowed-out book. "I don't need a perfect plan," he said. "Just a forever that includes you." She didn't cry. She just smiled, steady and sure, and said yes again. The air buzzed with the scent of orange blossom and sea salt as Zara stepped barefoot onto the terrace. The Italian coastline unfolding below them like a living painting, cliffs draped in ivy, sunlight glittering off the waves, and wildflowers tumbling down stone walls. The villa behind her was centuries old, but newly restored, with arched windows, hand-painted ceilings, and a tiled mosaic courtyard that took her breath away every time she stepped through it. She held a sketchpad in one hand, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Finnley had insisted she take the entire summer off to finally start her eco-design project, an idea she'd shelved for years. Now, with no deadlines, no noise, and a view that made her chest ache with gratitude, she'd done more in 2 weeks than she had in the last year. Footsteps sounded behind her. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. "You're up early," she said. "I couldn't sleep." His voice was lower than usual, rough with sleep, and it made her heart lift. "You weren't in bed." "I had an idea," she said, tapping her pencil to her pad. "I think I finally figured out the irrigation system design for the sustainable rooftop gardens I've been sketching." He slid his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Of course you did. You probably solved a global water crisis before sunrise." She leaned back into him. "Not quite, but I'll take the compliment." They stood like that for a moment, the breeze lifting the hem of her robe. He kissed her shoulder once, then pulled away. "I have something for you," he said. She turned, raising an eyebrow. "You already gave me a villa." "That was just a location," he said, disappearing into the house. She followed him inside, her bare feet silent on the cool stone. He stopped in the sunroom where the walls were glass and the view was endless. On the table sat a wooden box carved with a delicate vine motif. "What is it?" she asked. He opened it carefully. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a key. She stared at it. "A key to what?" "My company," he said, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I made you a partner," he said. "In Rhodes and Wilda. I filed the paperwork last week. You now own 20%, she blinked, stunned. "But I didn't do anything." "You rebuilt me," he said simply. "Everything I've built since coming back into your life, every deal, every decision has been clearer, sharper, because you reminded me who I actually am. And I want you to shape where it goes next. I don't know the first thing about venture capital. I'm not asking you to manage portfolios. I'm asking you to challenge me, to keep me grounded, to be part of every room I walk into, even when you're not physically there. You're my compass, Zara." She pressed her hand to her chest, overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." He stepped closer. "Say yes." "I don't need any of this," she whispered. "I know," he said. "That's why it means more." She closed the distance and kissed him, slow and certain. When they pulled apart, her eyes were bright. "Then yes." Later that evening, they hosted a dinner on the lower terrace. Just close friends, people who meant something to both of them. Her two best friends from Chicago, his mentor from New York, and the artist from the gallery whose painting now hung in their villa. A gift from Finnley the day Zara signed her nonprofit's largest grant yet. As dusk fell, lanterns flickered above long tables dressed in linen and olive branches. Laughter spilled into the night, wine glasses clinked, and someone started playing acoustic guitar. Zara sat curled into Finnley's side, her head on his shoulder as the stars blinked awake above them. "I've never felt this peaceful," she said. "That's all I've ever wanted for you." She looked up at him. "And for you," he smiled softly. "You." Months passed like pages turning gently in a well-worn book. They returned to Chicago in the fall, splitting their time between the lakeside house. They bought together and her beloved downtown apartment, which they transformed into an innovation hub for sustainability projects. She began consulting for city development, and Finnley launched a new fund focused entirely on green tech. They didn't rush to plan a wedding. There was no deadline, no pressure, just a shared certainty that they were each other's future. On the anniversary of the wedding where they'd reunited, he brought her back to the ballroom not for a party, but for a private dinner he'd arranged under the same chandelier, now strung with white roses and tiny gold lights. He didn't wear a tux. She didn't wear a gown. It was just them, barefoot on the dance floor, swaying to a string quartet he'd flown in from Italy. "This is where it started again," she whispered. "This is where it never ended," he said. She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks as he spun her slowly. And when he pulled a ring from his pocket, simple and understated, she didn't need a speech. He slipped it onto her finger. They didn't wait for anyone's blessing or set a date or send invitations. They married in the garden of their home the following spring, surrounded by trees they'd planted together. Vows spoken with bare feet in the grass and sunlight in their eyes. There were no chandeliers. No formal aisle, just love given freely without fear. In the years that followed, they built more than businesses. They restored land, funded education programs, and created scholarships for young women in STEM. Zara's nonprofit expanded internationally. Finnley stepped back from high-stakes deals and focused on legacy. They never stopped dancing barefoot in kitchens. And every morning when she woke up beside him, she looked at the man who had once walked away and now never let go. Not because he'd changed, but because he'd come back. And this time he'd stayed.